Chapter 9. When Florentia was happily looking out the window, Clarivan was in Lulak's office. In addition to the job as the successor education teacher, like someone who took care of the education in the mansion, he also had a lot to report to the owner of the house. That's all I'm going to tell you today. Good job. Let's just sit down and get the tea. Then I won't give up. When Lulak pulled a small bell to ring, the attendant who was waiting outside came in with a teacup. Lulak Lombardi's office in the mansion. The sweet scent of the finest tea leaves delighted the sense of smell. So how do you feel? Although the words were cut off, the relationship between Lulak and Clarivan was enough to understand the meaning. I was able to understand the words of my lord. Yeah, it's a very good opinion you are. However, as much as he was stingy with others, Lulak laughed for one day because he knew of Clarivan, who was more strict to himself. Not so long ago, I thought she was just a normal 7-year-old child. It's a very strange thing. Even if not, I tried to ask about that. Clarivan said, putting down the teacup. I have called and asked the servants who had brought my Baigalyahan and Miss Florentia, and no one knew about the girl's genius. I see. I told you that Miss Florentia was qualified to take the class, and Galahan was also very surprised. Lulak rubbed the well-groomed beard. It was a habit that comes out unconsciously whenever I think deeply. Clarivan, who was looking at the figure, carefully put a horse on it. I don't think Miss Florentia was hiding her abilities. Hidden the ability? It's just one hypothesis. Please explain. Like the color of an old giant tree, Lulak's brown eyes, which became much darker with the years, contained the power to make the person facing him lower his head. Following the look of Lulak, Clarivan's face also became serious. She is a very brilliant lady, because she's such a person. She'll see things that ordinary children will never see. For example, this Lombardy is the location of his father, Galyahan's house. It could be. The atmosphere of Lulak became even heavier. He was the one who led the Lombardy family more successfully than anyone else. But he didn't go as far as his children growing. No, it was the most difficult thing in Lulak's Lombardy's life. One was too much, one had no idea, and one was weak. The eldest daughter and only daughter, Shananet, was the most appropriate. To Lulak, who was concerned about it, his son-in-law, Vestian Skolts, came to Daril-in-law and had his two sons follow Lombardy's surname. Even now, it wasn't once or twice that there was a problem when Lombardy's small business rights were taken away by Skolts, who was not even qualified. Lulak shook his head with a gloomy face and sighed and lamented. I was a little violent. However, the overlord was not to intervene in the succession fight. He just watches to avoid going to the extreme. Is it lucky that Florentia doesn't resemble her father? My heart, which seemed to be stuffy, came to mind as I thought of Florentia, and it opened up and became cool. Miss Florentia's brilliant brain may be due to Galyahan's proper parenting. The environment is important, but that's a pity. Galyahan's position is indeed limited to the extent that Florentia had to conceal her abilities. I don't have much time left yet. Don't be too impatient. At Clarivan's words, Lulak nodded his head heavily. Let's watch it. Make sure to report it directly to me after each class. Clarivan took another sip of tea and replaced it with an answer. Smart. It was then that sound of knock was heard. It was Vis, who appeared with Lulak's permission to come in. Father, the people from the top of Durak have come. Then I'll get up. As soon as Vis stepped into the office, Clarivan said, greeting Lulak. Only then, when Vis noticed the existence of Clarivan, outright displeased and frowned. You were there too. It's been a long time, Vis. The two of them couldn't get along and said the thing right in front of him. My father has to meet an important person, so get out of the table. No, sit down for a while, then go, Clarivan. Father! Although Vis showed dissatisfaction, Lulak did not budge. Clarivan, compelled to follow the orders of the mansion lord, shrugged and sat down again. Ask someone on the top of Durak to come in. Yeah. Although he didn't like the situation, Vis moved smoothly while staring at Clarivan. Soon after, a middle-aged man in a fancy dress waiting outside came in and politely greeted Lulak. Nice to meet you. This is Croyton, Angenas, at the top of the Durak. Angenas, the familiar family named wrinkled Clarivan's eyebrows. Angenas was the current empress family and the family of Seral, the wife of Vis. Clarivan quietly folded his arms. I'm Lulak Lombardi. Sit down and share the story. Even in the short moment as Croyton sat down, Vis couldn't hide his recalled face and shake his ass. I heard the story from my eldest son, but will you tell me about the plan again? At Lulak's words, Croyton cleared his throat. The explanation was lengthy. After the long story, Clarivan asked to confirm the point. So, you're trying to bring textiles from the east, process them, and sell them, but the current Durak tops don't have enough room to go up against such long distances. So, you want to ask me to transported them to the top of Lombardy? Yes, that's right. Also, the payment for the textile should be borrowed from Lombardy Bank. Yes, I would appreciate it if you do. Huh. What the hell is this bullshit? Clarivan rubbed his bloody forehead and stared at Vis, sitting across the table. Hmm. Lulak was also rubbing his stretched beard, as if he was uncomfortable. Isn't that a very good way, father? The words of the stupid Vis seemed to explode. Now it was clear that he didn't even know what was the problem. If this is the case, please pay a large amount. Moreover, the Empress' cousin brother, who was none other than Anjana's delinquent, as if he was looking for the money he had entrusted to him. Gosh, from their point of view, they might have thought it was all a simple thing. This is Anjana's, the mother's family of Astana, the first prince. The imperial family at the front, with the empress as the backbone, was tied together. In other words, Lombardy had to deal with the failure of this business, where only the shell was on top of the durak, and eventually running with Lombardy's money. Unless they intend to completely pretend to be with the imperial family, it would be impossible for Anjanus to procure the door as if pursuing the adaptor, and knowing that they knocked on the door of Lombardy. Who doesn't know what kind of storm that will appear in each of these words? The only one that didn't know about this was Vis, who is now smiling. Not even Lulak knows how ridiculous this business plan. Clarivan tried to calm his anger. It was because he believed that Lulak would refuse moderately. I'll leave this to you, Vis. Try to do it thoroughly without making any mistakes. My lord, Clarivan startled, exclaimed, but Lulak did not open his mouth again. Yes, trust me, father. Vis was inclined to run away with Durak's top lord before his speech changed. Clarivan, who alternated between Lulak and Vis, who were consistent in silence, stood up from his seat and said firmly, hoping that he couldn't. Let's look at the things and talk before. It was Vis who was embarrassed by the sudden intervention. What kind of thunderbolt is this in the midst of happily saying it was done? The inside of this top-tier Durak project was the golden circle that would allow Vis to approach the power of the center even further. Currently, Angenas is experiencing some financial difficulties, and if he can solve it with this textile business, Empress will be in great debt to himself. But when he hurriedly looked at the complexion of his father, who didn't know his heart, he was lingering at his opinion. This yelled at Clarivan, who was sprinkling ashes over the finished rice. You, someone who is responsible for children's education, don't. However, Clarivan ignored Vis and looked only at Lulak. That's not an unreasonable request. How about you, mister? Croydon rolled his eyeballs, as if for a while, and nodded reluctantly. I do that. I have a pile of textiles that I have already brought, so I will take them and visit again. Vis' crumpled face turned red in front of the top of the durak, and I couldn't lift my head like a man who had done something wrong. Sorry, mister, it is not necessary. That idiot. Clarivan got sick of holding back what he wanted to yell. It's like earning a low profile to a visitor who came to borrow Lombardy's hand and money. No matter how stupid dogs were, they knew who to show their ships to. Is he the son of Lulak? Clarivan stared at Lulak, who looked at her eldest son with unknown eyes, but eventually shook his head. Is this right here? I was standing at the big door, although I lived in Lombardy for over 20 years. It was a room I had never been in. When I was in class, I used the research room of the education officer in the North Annex, not near the office of the Lord Office. I guess this is right. Well, shrugging me, I pushed the big door with strength. The door opened smoothly, without any noise, and the interior was visible. What? I used to think of a typical classroom with desks and chairs. Actually, that was the environment when I was in class. However, the appearance that I faced inside was completely different from that of a typical classroom. The large space was filled with warm sunlight, and the carpet felt under my feet was soft enough to lie down right away. Large and small sofas that looked comfortable even at a glance were laid out all over the place, and musical instruments and cute dolls were placed in several places in the middle. All I could see was a large blackboard and books filling one side of the wall, and there were small human figures that naturally took over such a space as if it were mine. Everyone was looking at me to see if I had heard the sound coming in, but the appearance was different. Balzac is astonished by his mouth wide open lying on the widest sofa. Balzac's older sister, Lorraine, who was reading a book with a large doll on one side, and the twin sons of my aunt Shananette, Gilio and Mayron, are sitting across the sunny window and looking at me with fat faces. They were Lombardy's descendants, my cousins. End of chapter 9.